Hello everybody, welcome to my channel or stream or wherever you're watching me at. I am JM Wheat and I'm going to do a little painting tutorial for you. I haven't done one of these before, but I thought, you know what, why not try it and show people how I do what I do. If you know me at all, or you've seen any of my paintings on Instagram or Facebook or ArtStation or my stuff on YouTube, you know that my favorite thing in the world to paint is clouds. Clouds are so much fun to paint, so I figured I'd do a little demo here and show people how I do what I do. So cool, let's get started. I'm starting here with my normal, I usually paint on a 32 by 40 canvas at 300 dpi, so they're nice and big for printing. That can make some issues if you're running on a smaller computer with some of the techniques I use for blending and stuff. And even on here, especially when I'm recording and stuff, it can kind of come into play and be a little bit of an issue. But so if you want to work at a smaller size, that's completely up to you. I like to do it because I do like to print my stuff out, and the bigger the size, the better for that. So the first thing I always do is lay down a background sky, and background skies are usually done by me with a big fuzzy soft round brush. Make it nice and big. Start with a nice blue in this sky. I think we'll just do kind of a normal blue sky, normal day with some big fluffy white clouds in it to get started. I got my opacity turned down a little bit too far here. Bump it up so this goes a little bit faster. I could use a little bit more. There we go, that's a little better. Make it a little bit brighter of a blue. When you're painting skies, it's good to keep in mind that skies get darker in pictures the higher you go up normally. That's because the sky is a dome over top of you, and so what is higher in a picture is getting closer to you, and things that are closer to you in a picture should always be darker and more saturated. So as you go higher in your sky, it should usually get darker, depending on where your light source is coming from, but usually the top of your sky is going to be darker than down towards the horizon. So I'm going to take a little bit lighter blue and come down towards our horizon here, wherever it may be. Haven't put any land in yet, so we don't really know where that's going to be as of right now. I just kind of keep working my way down. Just little variations here and there with a big fuzzy brush, and you'll get something like that. If you want to, sometimes I'll come up and I will do a blur just to blend it in even better so you don't get any kind of lines like so. Alright, so to put in clouds, you're going to want a new layer. Pop in a new layer there. Put it over your sky, obviously on top, because you don't want it behind the sky or you won't be able to see them. And for my clouds, I have a couple custom brushes I've built. Where are they? One is kind of more a soft edges, one has a little harder edges for more detailing. So I usually start with the softer edge brush. And you can do this with any kind of softer edge brush, even just a soft round would work as well. Or anything, that has some variation in the edges too. Photoshop has a ton of different options that come with Photoshop, and I'm sure other programs do as well. Something with some variation in the edges kind of gives you that more random feel to the edge of your clouds. And if you set the opacity way down and mess with some of the other settings, like the shape and the scattering settings, you can get it to kind of give the same effect that like the brush that I have here is. But that being said, what I basically do is grab my softer brush to start with, Bump the opacity up a little bit here and start going to town. Just putting in some basic cloud shapes. And I usually like to start with the darker side of the midtones of the cloud. A lot of people like to work dark to light or light to dark. I like working from mid-dark and then going kind of both ways. I'll put in my highlights and then I'll put in some shadows and just kind of let the cloud evolve. You may look at your clouds as you're painting them, and I do this all the time. It's like, oh, I hate this. It's terrible. What am I doing? I should give up on life. But if you keep pushing through it, you'll eventually find those clouds in the shapes, and you'll be amazed. You'll be like, wow, where did that come from? So pop in just a basic cloud shape, something like that. Pretty easy. On the same layer, I like to use as few layers as possible, so my clouds are usually all on one layer. If I screw up, then I just paint over it, just like as if I was painting something traditional. So highlights, I will take something really white, like almost completely, you can see up here, completely white, still using the soft brush. I'll take the size way down and take the opacity back down to somewhere around 20 or so. And then I think I've decided I want my light source coming from here. So I will start painting based off of that. Give that arrow. And so you can turn on, you can lock your layer. I sometimes like to do that if you really like your shape. If you don't care about your shape and you want to evolve it more, then don't lock the layer. And then you just kind of come in and take your light source edge. So my light is coming from up here. And I'm going to block in kind of the highlighted edge of this cloud. And you got to kind of find your shapes. This whole edge should have some pretty good highlight on it. But then you're also going to find in your cloud here, there's other parts that are kind of peeking out. A cloud is a solid object, so it will block the light and it will reflect the light. So you got to kind of imagine where these other pieces of the cloud are kind of sticking out and grabbing that light, and where they're kind of hiding the light from the rest of the cloud and keeping it in shadow. So pop it in just like this, and I use kind of a tapping motion. I don't stroke it. I tap in the edge of the cloud. You can kind of bring it around. All right, and that's pretty good to start with. Then I will go and grab my blending tool, the smudge tool, that is. There we go. It's called Kyle's Concept Brushes, all-purpose blend. It's a really nice blender brush. You can download it with Photoshop CC, I believe. I don't know if it comes pre-installed when you install Photoshop, but it is one of the downloadable brush packs, and it's a really nice blender. I usually will grab it, and then the strength is set to 24, but for my clouds, I knock it way down, usually somewhere between 6 and 12. And then all you do is take it in, and using kind of a circular motion, see, it's too big still. You need to make the brush really small. You hit the far edge of your highlight, so the edge that is furthest away from the light source. And with a circular motion, you just kind of blend it in to the back of the cloud. And you might want to blend all the way out into the sky in some parts. That kind of makes the cloud feel a little bit more fluffy. But you don't want to do that everywhere. You want to leave some of these harder edges because they just look nice. And they give your cloud some definition and shape. So going through, blending. kind of take it and, like I said, just kind of blend it up too. Bob Ross used to say 2 hairs and some air, barely touching it. That's why I have the strength set way down. You just kind of take it and lift the clouds up into the sky, blend them into the background, and they start looking like awesome little fluffy clouds. Just keep going all the way around. I'm using a Wacom tablet. I've always used them. I like them a lot. They're a little more expensive, but they are awesome. I've never tried doing any of these methods with a mouse. If you can do it, you are awesome. Give it a go, but I do recommend having a tablet of some kind because using a pen is just so much better than trying to do anything with a mouse, art-wise. Alright, so that's the first highlight edge, kind of blended in. And then I usually will go a little bit darker, maybe a little bit more saturated, and go way down with the opacity. Back to your cloud brush, the brush you're using for a cloud, and just start hitting these darker areas with some shadow. Back to some light. Maybe don't go quite as bright now. And I come back along the highlighted edge. I kind of adjust the size of my brush as I'm going. So I'll use like a small brush, and I'll bump it up in size, make it bigger, and then small again, just to give it some variation. Back to my blender and just keep blending them in. Hit it here and there, make it softer in some parts, leave it a little more sharp in others. Usually about now I like to, even if I don't know what I'm going to be doing down below, I like to throw in at least a horizon line of some kind, just so the cloud feels like it's not just floating in space. So I'll grab a color, just kind of a simple brush, whatever, it doesn't really matter, and just throw in some land. Or not that brush. That brush is slow moving. Let's see, what would be a good color contrast here? A little too green, I think. I think I want something a little more fall-esque, since it is autumn. And just kind of scratching a line, or some land. So it looks like you're your cloud isn't just floating above nothing. All right. Sharpen up the horizon. There we go. Now your cloud doesn't look like it's hanging above absolutely nothing. And in doing that, kind of deciding where I want my horizon, I can also then take my cloud layer and maybe position it a little better. So there, it's hanging a little lower in the sky actually. I'm going to use my little bit harder brush, cloud brush here. Bring the opacity up just a little and see what we can do to give this a little more character. So we're going to come back with some nice bright, almost completely white. Very small this time. I'm just tapping in tiny bits of highlight here. Maybe the cloud needs some more character here. Don't get too carried away before you start blending again. I usually like to do kind of one section at a time. Make it look a little bit more wispy up here at the top. And you see, this isn't right now. This is completely wrong. This is way too light because it's behind this cloud here, or this bump on the cloud here, so it shouldn't be that bright. But that's easy enough to fix. Just grab a little bit darker color, come back in. I'll use my soft brush this time, bump the opacity down so you can kind of get it just right. And there we go. That makes it look a lot better. Highlights. It's all about highlighting and then blending. That's what's going to give your cloud good character. You'll see parts that are like, oh my gosh, that looks terrible. But then as soon as you start blending it in, it's like, wow, that actually works really well. I wouldn't suggest leaving your painting without doing a bit of blending first, because you'll come back to it the next day and look at it and go, ugh, what was I doing? This is terrible. And you'll want to stop and just start something new. So I always try to make sure I blend it into a place that looks, you know, somewhat like a cloud. If I'm going to end for the day and come back to it later. Because you don't want to come back to a painting that looks bad, that you're not happy with. At the stage it's in, that is. Obviously I'm not happy with this painting. It's barely started. And it's not done yet. But at least when I look at it, I can go, okay, yeah. I see what I was doing and where I was going with it. So that's one nice big cloud in the background. If you want, you can add a new layer and pop in another layer of clouds quite easily. Grab kind of another mid-tone color and just start the same exact process over again. So grab your soft cloud brush, Bump up the size a little bit, and you can come in. You might want to work a little brighter so you can see it actually, and then work to your midtones. Bring it in. Clouds do form in layers too in the sky, so that's one part where you might want to use a layer for a new cloud. I usually will put in a cloud like this, and then when I'm happy with the shape and kind of where it's going, I'll drop it. I'll merge the two layers back into one layer, so that I'm still working on one layer. If you're getting confused, you can always shut off that back layer, and then you'll be able to see what you're working on. Let's make this one go right off the page here. See, I use kind of circular motions when I'm making my clouds too. I like them to be fluffy. Because if you just do this, you're just going to get a bunch of lines. But if you do this, and kind of build up, then you get that more fluffy feel to it. Go really bright, take the size down, opacity. And hit those highlighted edges. And by not using something completely solid or opaque, a brush, you can kind of start seeing some cloud shapes too, some highlighted spots. So don't ever use something that's at 100% opacity. You know, you're always going to want to be somewhere in between 100 and 0. Probably more like 75 and 0 is probably where you want to be, especially with clouds, no matter what you're doing, because that difference in opacity helps you find your shapes. I don't like that. That wasn't what I wanted to do, really. So just going to undo it, the beauty of Photoshop. Come back in with my blending brush. A good way to get better at painting clouds and painting anything, especially if you're into landscapes or really anything, even figure painting or drawing. A good way, if you're wanting to get better digitally, probably the best thing I can suggest is going and watching and following along with traditional painters. That's what I did a lot of back when I was first starting out, is I'd watch Bob Ross, and I'd sit here with Photoshop open, put a Bob Ross painting tutorial on, and try to follow along digitally, and do his steps. Because if you learn how to paint digitally as if you were painting traditionally, it really helps you kind of grasp the concepts more. And then once you have the fundamentals down, then you can start experimenting with all the awesome tools that Photoshop offers. You know, layers and all that stuff. All right. So there you pop out the other layer with that one on top. Mess with it a little bit, get it right how you want it. I think it looks better like that, actually. Another advantage to painting digital, you can kind of move it around and then just come back in here and flesh it back out a little more. White color. We're starting to get some really nice basic clouds. Yeah, these are looking nice. I think I like where those are at, so I'll go ahead and collapse these layers down into one. So it's one cloud layer now. I can kind of work on blending some more. Finding those shapes. Oop, I think that is way too much. I want to bump that down to probably like 21. Let's try 21. That might even be, that's even actually a little high. I like building up my clouds slowly. Just keep adding highlights and blending until you get something that you really like. I think this background cloud here needs some more highlights, definitely. Let's try using the harder brush. Something kind of funky going on here. That doesn't look quite natural. You see that? So I'm going to come in here and highlight it a little bit more. See how it kind of pulls it out? It makes it look more rounded. I don't know what I'm doing there. Sometimes it's fun to just kind of see what happens. Blend it in. That looks a little weird. So if you don't like it, see, it's thinking. It's a big canvas. Just come in and erase it. Go back and blend that out. That's really the basics of building a cloud. And then it's just, it's just keeping at it. Sometimes I'll spend way more time than I should just trying to find the cool shapes in the clouds. So if you're having a hard time finding those shapes, it's just not looking right, like there's some parts in here that just aren't looking right, I'll bump the size of my brush way up and just kind of go over those areas until you can start to see something. Then take it back down, take your opacity back up, and go back in and start highlighting again in some new places. Maybe you'll find something new. Back to blending. You can kind of do the same thing with the blending brush too. If there's parts of it that you're just not feeling, like this is starting to look a little too, like there's too many harsh edges, so I'll just bump that up and kind of tap it. You don't want to go too crazy, because when you make this brush really big, it really starts blending the colors funny. But you can just kind of tap away some of that really quickly. Blends together and starts looking a little more fluffy. See how quickly that got rid of that? I'm not sure I wanted that to happen, but whatever. Let's leave it and see what happens. There's been times where I get so tired of messing with a cloud, it's just not working, but I'll just come in and I just paint over the whole thing and basically start all over again. But usually if you just keep at it, you'll eventually find those shapes. You'll find something that works good. That was looking a little weird. Whatever was going on right here. We're getting that weird. See how it looks like it's almost like a bowl? So you're going to want to take a lighter color. Let's use the soft brush. A little bit bigger. And just kind of bring it out a little. Blend it into there. Too harsh of an edge. A little too much hard edge going on up here. Blend it back into the sky a little bit. I like this. I like this hard edge here, so I don't want to touch that too much. But some of the other parts, if you just blend it back into the sky, it gives your cloud some good depth. It really sets it into the sky. Right, let's work in some shadows. So Take a little bit more saturated, really dark, not really dark, but darker blue. I'm going to stick with the soft brush. Take my opacity way down. I'm at 4% here. Just kind of lightly go in there. Really push the highlights out. With our light source coming from up here, the bottoms of these clouds are actually going to be quite dark because they're obviously under. This is the base. So you want to give them a nice dark base because they're in shadow. The sun is above them. So their base is going to be in shadow. And these ones I'm not using a circular motion because I'm wanting to give them a nice base. Might come out just a little here and there. Should have bumped my opacity up that. That would have made it a lot faster. There we go. Hit it low from when I was doing the shadows. And this is a shadow, but this is kind of a very pronounced shadow down here. It's probably the darkest part of your clouds is the base. If the sun is from up here. If you're painting a sunset and the sun's way down here, well, then this is going to be all lit up from the sunset. But if you're painting with a light source coming from up above, the bottoms of your clouds are going to be the darkest. And again, just take your blender and you can blend in the edge just a little. I'd even take your opacity or your strength down on this one. So you're not doing it too hard, but you do want to blend it in. Blend it in a bit so you don't have those harsh lines in your clouds. And blend it into the background too. Feeling a little wonky down here. So let's grab us. No, not that. Soft brush, a little bit smaller, an eraser. Put your opacity at like 20-some%, and just kind of. There you go. Yeah, that bump was kind of annoying me for some reason. Didn't fit quite right. Wasn't quite straight enough down here. Alright, let's work on this area a little bit over here. A lot of this isn't quite developed yet. This is starting to look nice up here though. Getting a lot of good shapes, good different highlights, and it's all about layering. You just want to keep adding highlights, keep blending them in, add in a few shadows, blend them in. Big brush it if you have to. probably hear that. I'm tapping it. I'm not dragging it. Tapping it in. Make it smaller. Make it brighter. Oh, that's about right. You really start to find your clouds. You gotta find your clouds. I think that's why I like painting clouds so much. You really do get to find them. They're like hiding in your painting. You get to go in there and pull them out. I don't know how many times I've gone from absolutely hating what I'm working on, painting wise, especially with the clouds, to just going, wow, there they are. I knew they were hiding in there somewhere. Just keep blending. Just keep blending, blending, blending. Blending and rendering. Jump around a lot too, especially when I'm blending, because I don't want to overblend certain parts. That's also why you don't see me zoom in too much on my work. I like to work bigger, unless I'm doing some really small details, and that's usually in the ground, usually not in the clouds, because clouds are my clouds anyways, are usually really fluffy, big cumulus clouds. So I don't want to overblend any one area, because you do want some of those nice harsh lines, like here. You got one here. That might look a little better if it was a little softer. But up in here and even in here, you can see there's some nice definition between light and dark. And I don't want to get rid of all that. And if you spend too much time in one spot, that is exactly what will happen. All right. Alright, so that's basically how I paint a cloud. I could keep going with this over and over again. You could just keep adding more detail, adding more highlights, adding more shadow, blending it in, add some more layers of clouds. You could pop in another one behind there if you want to go with a nice big one. And it's the same process for every cloud you do. Maybe there's a nice big one back here, right behind it. And he stretches all the way off the canvas here. Start with a nice big brush. Actually, I could put my opacity probably more like 45. Get it in nice and quick. That's a little bright too. I probably should have used a mid-tone, but this will show you how it actually, when you're putting in the shape, it really doesn't matter. So there we go. Got a nice big shape back there. Maybe it's even peeking out over here. All right. Now take your mid-tone. And put it in. Your highlights. Our light source is still coming from this way, which I think I might have kind of screwed up there. So actually, you know what? I don't like this gray either. I think I want it more of this kind of bluish mid-tone. So what I can do is go and lock this layer, make this nice and big, and just paint over the whole thing. Let's bump this way up so it covers it nice and quick. See how it just changes the color? But it also doesn't change my shape. Make sure you unlock it if you're going to go back in and want to change the shape, or if you want to do any blending into the sky. Because if you have this locked and you try to blend into the sky, it doesn't do anything. It'll blend everything that's inside of the shape, but not outside of the shape. So you unlock it, and then it'll kind of blend it off into the sky. So there's a nice big cloud in the background. Sometimes it helps. This is another nice thing about Photoshop. Working digitally, you can flip it just to see what it might look like over here. Kind of like that. And you can keep painting with it. Kind of see where it goes. There's some little wispy ones coming off here too. That's Bob Ross coming through there. The noises. You gotta make the noises. Small brush, highlighting. And you just start the process all over again for the one behind. And when you get happy with it and how it looks, merge it into the other cloud layer and keep going with it. Or don't merge it into the other cloud layer. You don't have to merge it into the other cloud layer. Maybe you want to keep it back there and mess with it later. I don't know. I like merging my layers because it makes me be more intentional, and I feel like it makes me a better artist. So I don't have those. You don't have that crutch of being able to say, "Oh, well, I don't like this. Let's just get rid of it." Back when I first started painting digitally, when I was starting to try to learn how to do this was years ago, I'd have a different layer for, every color. Because I was too afraid. I wanted that security of being able to go and fix it, but really how do you explain it? It became a crutch, you know. It was just like I didn't push myself to make smart choices with my paintings because there was always that thought of, well, I can just go and tweak this or tweak that, you know. I don't know. I think the best way to learn is to make mistakes, you know, and that is the one thing about painting digitally in Photoshop or something is it's so easy to just erase your mistakes and not try to learn from them, which is what I'm kind of trying to get at with the don't use so many layers. Try to limit how many undos you use. You know, if you screw up, just paint over it. Don't necessarily undo it. Learn from that mistake and try to fix it, and that will make you a better artist in the long run. And then once you're an amazing, perfect artist, then feel free to use 700 undos and and 200 layers. But until you get to that master level, you know, allow yourself to make mistakes and then try to fix them. It'll make you a better artist. These little wispies aren't really looking quite right. Maybe they need some more blending into the sky. Get nice and small. Kind of go back and forth. Well, let's turn the strength down to like 6. I don't want to overdo it. Let's see, let's get some of this dark going on here. Some more shadows. Again, like 15, maybe even 11%. Heck, why not? Why not 6? 9. That'll work. Let's use 9. For shadows, I usually like to use the soft one. Let's just go and let's get this guy here. Let's kind of push him forward. So let's push this one back a little bit here. Get those shadows going in there real good. These guys a little bit here too. And blending, blending, blending. Right. So those clouds are starting to look pretty good. This is the point in the painting where I usually would have done that even sooner, but I was really focusing on the clouds for this video. So, but I'd usually kind of leave them be for a little bit and go work on, you know, whatever is going on down below the horizon. Start fleshing that out, and then you can come back and keep working on the clouds after you let it sit for a minute and kind of take a look at it and see how it's working with the rest of the painting. But that's basically how I do my clouds. I hope you learned something from that, and let me know in the comments, what else you guys want to know. Maybe I'll make some other tutorials. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.